Hey everybody, this is Mark Bradshaw. I'm with Nitrobeard.com, and this is my Game of the Year announcement. For the sake of full disclosure, here's a list of games I did not have time to play this year that could have been in some way made impact upon my top 10 list. I hope to get around to touching on at least most of these in 2012, but this year is front-loaded so to a hilarious degree, and I'm still nowhere near bored with Skyrim yet. And here's a list of the games I have not touched. Catherine, El Shaddai, Saints Row 3, Portal 2, Skyward Sword, Bulletstorm, Child of Eden, Dirt 3, Resistance 3, Space Marine, Uncharted 3. Now I fully admit that some of these games may indeed be hot garbage, but they're all games I regret not getting to as of yet. And who knows, much like Nier turned out to be shockingly good, perhaps something like El Shaddai is secret best game of 2011. However, I get the feeling I'm making a terrible life decision by not dedicating the next 72 hours to Saint Row 3.
I don't see a bed.
Sleep is forbidden.
Similarly, I have a list of games that are probably going to make an unreasonable number of Game of the Year lists that I have absolutely no intention of touching. Battlefield 3, Call of Warfare Modern Battles 5, and Forza 4. Although normally driving sims in the Forza Gran Turismo vein are my absolute favorite video game experiences, I'm more than happy to sit out this year's version as there has been no URL improvements over Forza 3 aside from shoehorned in Connect support. As for the Modern Warfare twins, sorry, I'm just not that guy. Not that I'm talking down to you if you are, or I wish to sound bitter about these games having effectively taken over the console industry, but seriously, you guys have been playing these games since W's first administration. You gotta give it a rest. Anyway, on with my list. This is a top 5 list with another 4 games list as unranked honorable mentions, meaning this is basically a top 9 list, but what kind of sick bastard comes up with a top 9 list? I wanted to start off with 2 games I did manage to play this year that are nowhere near my top 9, but I wish to bitch about anyway, my dishonorable mentions if you were. 1. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Fate of Two Worlds. Congrats Capcom, I suffered through 87 variations of Street Fighter II, your company's complete refusal to accept the superiority of the Alpha series, 12 years of reuse of the Morgan sprite, and the exclusion of Chun-Li from Street Fighter III, but you finally turned me off your fighting games. You shoved a feature-incomplete version of Marvel 3 out the door in order to meet a fiscal year deadline, complete with horrible and obvious balance issues, only to finish that game and then re-release it in the same calendar year for another $40. Fuck you. I'm done. I wash my hands of you. At least until you release Darkstalkers 3 on XBLA or Street Fighter 4, any other game aside from Marvel 3 I'm actually confident at. I'm really bad at Marvel 3. LA Noire. I don't know what makes me upset. The fact that Rockstar willfully misled the gaming public as to what game we were expect out of LA Noire, or how badly Team Bondi fucked up what they had begun with. Turns out it wasn't Grand Theft Auto Robert Mitchum edition at all, but some kind of bizarre open world edition of Phoenix Wright. And even that would have been a great idea, but Bondi brought us the worst elements of both genres with confusing, incomplete clues and the emptiest, most banal world of violence ever witnessed. And that's without the completely falling apart at the end that became the worst version of Gears of War you ever played in your entire life. What's worse, nothing good came of this exercise. The IP is mangled and useless and will never make another dime again, and the director, Brendan McNamara, he's receiving more funding from the Mad Max guy. There's no God. Anyway, on with the stuff that was good, but not quite good enough for me to talk about at length. The honorable mentions. Driver San Francisco is probably the most original racing game developed since the first Test Drive Unlimited. Maybe not the best because the driving model introduces fishtails for no other good reason that developers really love 70 muscles cars. When's the last time you played a racing game with a good single-player game? I just hope the people behind Need for Speed the Run are paying attention to this game and realize exactly how bad they fucked up a good idea. Dark Souls would have been ranked higher, but it really is just more Demon Souls, and this time just with 360 achievements. Now, that's not a bad thing, but I don't think anyone really minded this. It was not so openly hostile thought player progression this time around, weren't the developers that made a legit stab at hardware optimization. Blighttown is basically unplayable and may be the single most egregious example of that one bad level ruining an otherwise fine gaming experience. Arkham City probably deserves to be higher on this list. I've only managed to spend a weekend with the game, and every time I boot it up, I immediately wish I was either playing Skyrim or Gears of War 3.
A monument to your failure.
It's weird. Arkham Asylum was probably the defining Western action game of this console generation, but I generally think moving from the tightly controlled Metroid-like corridors of first Arkham into the most densely packed sandbox the world has ever seen may have ruined this game's charm. I'm probably wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. I'll find out more next week. I really want to put Shadows of the Dam higher into the top 5, if for no other reason to have a Japanese game in the list, but that's a completely bullshit excuse to elevate what's just an average game. The sad part is it shouldn't have been as average as it was. This is the most outstanding pedigree of any game released this year. But this year, average isn't good enough.
Jeez, excuse me for having a little fruit fantasy.
Here's my final list of top 5 games. Number 5, Mortal Kombat. Alright, look, you either get Mortal Kombat or you don't. If you look at the reactions to the latest Mortal Kombat and are baffled why people are excited to watch you to be a substandard Street Fighter clone, I can't convince you otherwise. But if you get Mortal Kombat, I'm going to explain it like this. This is the best Mortal Kombat made. It's better than Ultimate 3, better than Mortal Kombat 2, certainly better than anything 3D these guys have ever made. The game doesn't just return the franchise back to a relevant topic of discussion, it's also one of the best fighting games produced since the fall of the arcades. And that's before you get into the part where NetherRealm effectively rewrote the way single-player campaigns will be produced in fighting games from this point forward.
I am impressed.
Do it.
Do what?
Kill me.
Why would I do that?
So why isn't it higher and barely on the edge of the honorable mention list? Well, the online sucks. Unless you've got a buddy who's just as an MK as you are to call on whenever you want some competition, you're kind of screwed. The single player is amazing though. Between the arcade mode and its AI and the story mode, the mission tower offers hours of enjoyment and you'll easily get your money's worth. But if you're coming into this for human competition, sadly, you gotta look elsewhere. Four, Gears of War 3. I'm still trying to come to terms with my feelings for Gears 3. On one hand, co-op dude bro shooters are among the last things in gaming I'm interested in short of railroad sims. On the other hand, if you try to deny me access to horde mode, I'm going to kick your slowest child. Even the single player mode of Gears 3 isn't that bad, even if it does read like something cribbed from an 18-year-old's live journal account. But the gameplay is exceptionally well polished, exceptionally well crafted, and almost flawless. It's the chronic example of what a talented development studio can pull off when they're allowed to follow through on their vision for a series and not be rushed to put out a yearly release. Every last Transformers game produced from High Moon Studios will be just as rewarding and just as well made if they're simply left the fuck alone for a couple years. Number 3, Dead Space 2. Dead Space 2 is the game destined to be unfairly overlooked come Game of the Year time simply because it released too early in the year. And that's a shame because Dead Space 2 is insanely good and will influence survival horror for the next decade. I don't think there's been a game released since the first Bioshock that's been as atmospheric or tense as foreboding as Dead Space 2. It's also an absolute great gameplay experience, proving once and for all there's a happy medium between Resident Evil's palpable dread and the cathartic thrill of Western-style run-and-gun gameplay. Deus Ex 2, Human Revolution. I've come to peace with Deus Ex since my not review a couple months back when it first came out. Ultimately, I'm happy with it, and can't deny the inherent quality of any game I've played through 3 times in succession. Could have been more than it was? Sure. Was it more of a first-person shooter that it really needed to be? Sure. Did the final 2 hours completely fall apart? Sure. But it's also probably the best Deus Ex we could have hoped to have got in 2011. In the end, it's an outstanding experience whose only flaw was its pedigree. If this game never had the Deus Ex name tied to it, it'd be an instant classic. As it stands, it's merely an outstanding video game, just not one that lives up to our memories of the first Deus Ex. And then, nothing could have. Human Revolution plays out as well as we could hope for a first-person shooter with our role-playing game influences. Its universe is outstanding, the characters interesting, the writers, well, the writing's good for a video game. I would have been happy if Eidos Montreal managed not to embarrass themselves in pursuit of a quixotic goal. Instead, they had simply put out the second best video game experience of the year. It's pretty damn good. Skyrim. Of course it was Skyrim. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't biased and incapable of judging this game fairly. Skyrim was my game of the year before I opened the stupid box. But Bethesda are one of the few companies you can trust with such an assertion, and I think my assumptions were proved correct. Skyrim isn't just an outstanding experience, or perhaps not a great game, as I discussed in my not review earlier. It's a landmark achievement. It's an assertion that gamers can be trusted and do not need to be shepherded from one locale to the next. That games need not be a roller coaster ride where you're guaranteed to see 9% of the game in return for your $60. It is an enormous, expansive, daunting, frustrating, and ultimately rewarding experience and most addictive video game I can remember since my first exposure to EverQuest over a decade ago. Skyrim is a landmark achievement and something every developer should look toward for inspiration. That's it for 2011. Maybe one of the best games for years in the history of our industry, and 2012 looks just as amazing as well. If this is what we expect from our developers once they're forced to abandon the pursuit of graphical fidelity, I hope Sony screws up just as badly with the PlayStation 4 and Microsoft waits just as long on the 360 loop. Thank you, it's been a great year.